Let's get something straight once and for all. Chiropractic cannot cure a genetic condition. Okay, we're all agreed? So, Down syndrome is a genetic condition where a person has an extra copy of a chromosome 21, and that is not something that can just be cured with an adjustment, right? However, people with Down syndrome often have various challenges that can be helped. This conversation is also about giving people quality of life, access to care, and access to their best, brightest, most joyful life. I'm Jenna Quinton, founder of Adjust Your Media and host of What Chiropractic Doesn't Cure, Stories of Innate podcast. Thanks for joining me. Today on the podcast, we have Dr. Julia North. Welcome. She practices outside of St. Louis in St. Petersburg, Missouri. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So you started to tell me this story at Focus, Oklahoma City a little bit ago. And since then, I've been looking forward to having you share this with a broader audience. So you told me you had a patient with Down syndrome, and clearly chiropractic does not cure this. So tell us about this story. What was this woman's challenges? What were they looking for when they came to you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was actually just listening to a few of the other podcast interviews you did, and it was Dr. Elise Cloutier, not pronounce her last name, but she was mentioning how one of her amazing stories happened very soon after she graduated chiropractic school, and this story was very similar. So I was still very new to what all chiropractic could do, some of the miracle stories that you've been interviewing about and hearing. And so with this young woman, we'll call her M. So M, her mother brought her in. She was a early 20s young woman who came in with her mother, and I asked them, what brought you in? What is she dealing with? What pain? That's what we're taught in school. What pain is she having? And her mother says, I'm really not sure. M was nonverbal. She would make some grunting sounds, grunting responses when you would ask her questions, but she'd been nonverbal for over 20 years.
Wow.
And her mother had said that they had had previous instances where M had dislocated her arm, for example, and they didn't find out for over 2 weeks because she wasn't able to verbalize. They just noticed that she was holding her arm really close to her body and had been doing so for a couple of weeks. So they took her to the medical doctor who x-rayed, and she had a full dislocation of her elbow.
That's
and they
sad.
had no idea, which is crazy for like you and me to think, because, oh my gosh, if I had to dislocate an elbow, that would be crazy. But because she was nonverbal, she couldn't convey that she was in that amount of pain. So someone brought her in and said, I really don't know if anything's wrong, what's wrong. I just happened to meet a person who is very passionate about chiropractic and said you can help. I said, okay, here we go. So I started by taking x-rays in trisomy 21 Down syndrome, as most people know it. There is between about 10 and 30% incidence where they have upper cervical instability, or they're missing a ligament that helps stabilize the cervical spine. So she had previous MRIs and tests to show that she did have the transverse ligament. She did not have instability of the spine, so there was no contraindications to adjusting her. I took x-rays, was very thorough, but ultimately I was like, what do I do when there's no, what am I treating? Right. And then I kind of went back to what I'd been taught and what I'd learned throughout the years, which is we look for any stress in the nervous system, try to locate that, remove that, and let innate do the rest, let the body heal itself. So that's exactly what I did. I wasn't sure what we were going to see, if anything, because we didn't know she didn't have any particular symptoms, but it was such a cool thing to see. It didn't happen immediately. It was a couple of weeks in after she'd been coming in multiple times a week. But the first thing I noticed, she started making eye contact. It's like, okay, this is cool. She's getting comfortable and is able to look at us now. She was able to get on and off the table by herself.
Oh, wow.
I just kept watching how things were progressing. And then she started saying words. So just simple words, single words, like yes, no. And then after a few more weeks passed, and her mom, they came back from vacation. I remember this was just great for the family. They had always taken an annual vacation. But Em had trouble navigating, getting in and out of the pool. They would go over rough terrain. She always needed assistance. And her mom came in and said, this is really bittersweet, but she got into the pool by herself. We went on a 2-mile hike. She was able to navigate all the trees, all the routes by herself. She didn't need me, which was bittersweet for the mother who'd been caring for her for over 20 years to such an intense level.
Yeah.
And then they came back, and I noticed her independence just continued to grow. She started initiating conversation. She would say, like, how are you? She would ask us how we were, and just watching over the course of a couple months going from, nonverbal, not making eye contact, not able to communicate her needs, her pains, her discomforts, to being able to navigate independently, going on a family vacation. I mean, that was absolutely huge.
Yes, I love so many parts of this. Like you said, that you weren't treating her for a specific symptom, you weren't treating her for a condition, you were just elevating her own expression of life and what that meant for her. And this is also where I love just the diversity of how that is different for each of us. Like, what is our life expression? And it's going to look differently, whether it's my 8-year-old and his expression of life is doing front flips on the trampoline while I look away. It's each of us. What is it that we want to do? What is it that we want to express in this life? And how do we want to connect with others? I was thinking, as you were saying about stability and walking, I take for granted that I can coordinate between my eyes and my hands and my feet and my movement and my proprioceptive senses to be able to do that. But at the same time, that is something that, whether we're trail running or whether this young woman was trying to just get in and out of the pool, it's the same concept at just different levels, everybody's own level of needing to be spatially aware and then move through that space. So it really is, whether someone is trying to trail run without breaking an ankle, or she was trying to navigate an uneven path, it's kind of comes to the same thing.
We take simple motions like walking or running, we take it for granted because we've done it for so long. In addition to chiropractic, I also coach pole vault and high jump part-time. And that's something I get to talk with the athletes a lot about, is because they get easily frustrated. They're like, why can't I do this thing that they see? It looks simple. And I'm like, well, what you're not remembering, it took you years to be able to walk and run. But because it's so early in our lives, we don't always think about it. But that neurologic development and integration becomes so subconscious to us. So to us, what might be trail running, like to Em, was just being able to get into a pool, being able to share that neurology tidbits with my student athletes as well is just super fun.
Yeah, because I am not an athlete by any stretch of the imagination. But when I see people doing some of those things where, you can outline it and the steps are fairly simple. Like my daughter was trying to do a cartwheel and the steps are fairly simple, but it is partly how your brain is holding you back to keep you safe and being like, oh, you're going to fall. And so I love that innate piece of when you are just in the flow and those moments where you are able to, whether it's something you've practiced like piano or pole vaulting or something, where you're able to be in that flow of innate intelligence and muscle memory and just do the thing.
Yeah, being able to integrate all that.
So how did this story kind of change your perspective? Especially, like you said, you were just starting out in practice. How did that change things for you?
It changed a whole lot. So I guess a lot of people have a really cool story about how they initially got to chiropractic school. I feel like the meat of my story really happened immediately after I graduated school, before I really became a chiropractor, if you will.
Sure.
I had the degree. I literally remember walking across the stage and I'm like, I should feel like a doctor now, and I don't. Like, this is terrifying, because that piece of paper isn't really what makes a chiropractor a chiropractor. It's what I learned afterwards, which was a lot about like the philosophy and the why. I was really lucky and grateful that my first experience out of school was with a very principled office. So there was another associate chiropractor, the clinic director, and myself. And I remember walking in pretty early, day one, day two, and I noticed the other associate in the office, he had this poster hanging up. And it was an old Sid Williams print with a quote, which I'd never heard of the guy at the time. I was just like,
yeah,
that's kind of a weird poster. I don't know why you have it up there. But anyways, it was a picture of a spine with like a cervical neck subluxation. And then next to it was a picture of like a noose. And it said underneath of it, subluxation, both stop life at the neck. One just does it a little quicker. And I remember seeing that for the first time and I was like, oh gosh, what what have I gotten myself into? What is
Yeah.
this? What does it mean? But like, it's the truth of it that I didn't understand at the time, that any subluxation, any nervous system interference is going to kill you. It just might kill you slower than, in this instance, being hung by a noose on the neck. So I was really lucky to have that other associate bounce ideas off of. Also very early in practice, it was probably the first day I was still shadowing the clinic director. And I remember a lady came in, she was dragging her leg. And immediately my, clinical school brain kicks in. I'm like, oh, well, she clearly needs an MRI. She's not in the right place. Why is she here? But during the consultation, she explained she'd gotten the MRI. She'd been to the medical doctor. She'd been to a neurologist, a second neurologist, a neurosurgeon, and nobody could find anything that they could help her with.
Right.
And I was like, oh, well, again, I was thinking like school, where do I send her now? Luckily, the clinic director is very principled and was like, okay, well, let's adjust you, let's see. But I remember he pulled me aside afterwards and he said, how did you feel about that? How did you feel? What were you taught in school? How would you have handled that patient? And I said the same thing, like, oh, in school, they would have been, ship her out. But
Yeah.
where do you go after you've already been everywhere? So that was kind of the first thing that opened my mind, that it's more than pain, discomfort, that whole neurologic function. And then I started to really notice the miracles. I was listening to the interview you did with Dr. Ryan Ryder as well, that we don't always know what to look for when it comes to these chiropractic miracles. But when you learn to connect the dots and really see that, oh, could it be coincidence that after 20 years, Em was now able to navigate by herself? I mean, I guess so, but that's a pretty hefty coincidence if she hasn't done it for the first 20 years. And then now all of a sudden, after 2 months of care, she's able to do these things independently. And we see those things everywhere. Another small story that kind of stuck out to me more recently was of a young family who brought in their son who was nonverbal. They had 20 insurance visits. They wanted to use them because they heard chiropractic might be able to help. I said, let's do it. Let's see. And I didn't notice the immediate, miracle of him speaking more, doing more. But then over time, they fell off the schedule, but they referred in another family, and this family came in. And something that the new family told me was that little boy was scheduled to have tubes put in his ears. But because of the chiropractic care, his family, he no longer needed them. So that's what they were bringing their daughter in for. And I was like, okay, so with the innate, we don't get to control how innate heals, how fast it heals, what it heals.
Yeah.
And so that was cool to see that it was kind of, it was in God's hands. It was out of my hands. My hands couldn't clear the specific subluxation that maybe was preventing that boy from speaking, but it helped with his ears so he didn't have to have ear infections and have the tubes anymore.
Yeah, it is interesting to see just how is the body going to prioritize healing. And, maybe it was just like these ear infections, those are pretty top priority for us right now. I kind of go back to Magic School Bus in my head when I'm picturing anatomy and things. And so, yeah, it's just like picturing all of the white blood cells off working on ear infections and being like, we just can't quite, we're not getting the right instructions. We don't know what to do here. We keep fighting the same battle. But what a relief for his family too. I can't imagine what recovery from surgery is like with a nonverbal child, but I imagine it would be pretty intense. And I know that people say ear tubes, it's a fairly routine procedure and things, but I imagine that would have been pretty intense for that family. So that's such a bigger impact than just simply being like, oh, fewer ear infections. Like that's a massive impact. And like you said, you don't know how or where the body is going to prioritize. But I love too that you've said a couple of times now that these stories are often from people who have seen the specialists, seen the doctors. They've done the MRIs, they've done the data. So it's even better because it's like the data is all there. The data is all there that says not working, not functioning. And so then that's such a chiropractic principle too, to say, okay, we're going to identify the nervous system dysfunction and we're going to correct it. And that's all we're going to do. There's this whole trail through all of these of just how we can make the body work better. But I feel like you probably do this well in conversations with patients too. What are some things that you say to kind of shift from we're going to relieve your pain to what's your quality of life? Like, how do you make that shift?
Yeah, I always tell patients pain's about 20% of the problem. The other 80% is this dysfunction that I found. And
Mm-hmm.
typically in my office, I x-ray most non-pregnant adult patients because that's the system I use to really visualize how is this stress manifesting in the spine itself. I take a lot of great pointers from all sorts of other wonderful chiropractors as well and how they convey it. But I always come back to, I've got, I mean, right behind me, you can probably see my little merit
Nice.
chart thing. So I always tell patients, okay, so you're coming in with headaches. That headaches is a sign that there's something blocking that connection between your brain and your body. So my job is to get in there, find where that stress is, move those joints, restore that motion, restore that neurologic connection, and then I got to keep it moving long enough for your body to heal. Then after that, we'll talk about stabilizing maintenance, all that great stuff, but just really reminding them that it's more. And I feel like we all innately know that our bodies are designed to function and help. I mean, from a young age, you get a cut and your body's going to heal it. You don't have to tell your body to heal it. Your body just knows how to do that. You don't tell your heart to beat. It just does that subconsciously, innately. And so I feel like you're able to connect with patients a lot on that aspect because we all understand that principle. A lot of patients might think that it's like putting a bone back into place and just reminding them, I flat out tell them, I'm like, I wish it was as simple as me pushing a bone back into place. That's not what I'm doing. Right. What I'm doing is retraining the neurology, changing the hormone production of your body so it can amplify your life. So your healing and your life abilities just increase. And people overall, they seem to really connect with that.
I like that phrase, retraining the neurology, because yes, I know that it would be so simple to just be like, it's dislocated, I moved it, it's now where it should be. But it is that nerve irritation. I really like the word irritation. It was, now I'm not going to remember his name. I'll remember it in a minute. But somebody was talking about how instead of just nerve pressure, it really is that nerve irritation. And, sometimes it takes us a little while to not be irritated. So yeah, that is such a great conversation because I think, like you said, we do innately start out like that. But then I realize even with my children, how quickly we teach children an outside in perspective. But, we start out, like you said, our heart is just beating, we're just breathing, our cuts are healing. But then we teach our kids really young, you need something. Oh, the doctor's going to heal you. Like even I think about growing up and like prayer circles and things, we pray that the doctor would be able to heal them. We quickly shift from this inside out, your body can heal itself, to you need something.
We take the power away from like our body and we give it to literally anything else. And that's it's heartbreaking. And it's the brainwashing of this multi-billion-dollar circle rat wheel thing that we keep spinning around that makes a lot of people a lot of money, but it doesn't really help a lot of people. And you're taught during pregnancy, don't put anything bad in your body because it's going to affect your baby. And then the second it's in the outside world, they act like it's an emergency that child even exists. It's like, wow, this child is here now. I don't know how it got here. Let's just start throwing outside interventions at it immediately. Another heartbreaking moment, I coach track, and I was talking to one of my athletes, and we're just talking about life, this, that, and the other. She said to me, isn't it scary to think that without modern medicine, we would all be dead right now? And yeah, that was my reaction too. I was like, oh, what? What have we been taught? What are you hearing? And she got into like all these communicable diseases and how without these pharmaceuticals, we wouldn't be here. And I was like, oh honey, your body has an incredible ability to heal. And so I try to even just like put those little nuggets here and there. I wasn't going to give her a 25-minute lecture on innate intelligence, but just starting with a simple thought that, your body does have an ability to heal, not solely dependent on outside intervention.
Even that is a modern idea. It's, since the 20th century, because I was reading in Dr. Fred Barge's book, Explanations, and he had a quote there from Florence Nightingale. So she's in the 1850s, in the Crimean War, in the trenches, revolutionized nursing, revolutionized battlefront health, really, healthcare. And she said, is it not living in a continual mistake to look upon diseases as we do now as separate entities, which must exist like cats and dogs, instead of looking upon them as conditions, like a dirty condition and clean condition, and just as much under our own control. And I was like, Florence, she said that 175 years ago, if my math is correct. And so, yeah, it is to think like, no, how she revolutionized, it wasn't through pharmaceuticals. She didn't save men's lives on the battlefront by, giving them ibuprofen and things. What she did was like soap and water.
Keep it clean and let the body heal.
Keep it clean, giving them good food. Like she was feeding them and checking on them and caring for them. Even I was thinking about, as we said, Band-Aids with kids. We give a child a magic kiss and you say, oh, let me kiss it and I'll make it all better. And in that way, even doing the same action, but with the intention of like giving them a hug, kissing them, but not telling them that the kiss is magic, telling them, oh, I'm going to kiss you. I'm going to hug you. Your body is so smart. Your body is so strong. You've got this. And like you said, empowering them in that. And that's also, I think, even coming back to your story of M, is that chiropractic isn't something you have to believe in. And I think that people like your athlete had such a strong belief in pharmaceuticals. Chiropractic isn't something you have to have a belief in. Someone who is nonverbal doesn't go, okay, I believe in chiropractic and this is going to help me to walk better. It just did, whether she believed it or not. And I'm sure that you see that with babies as well.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's nothing like, I don't know how you can look at a baby and not believe in this incredible, intelligent design, whether you believe it's God, Gaia, evolution, whatever. There's such an intelligence in a newborn. The eye contact they make. I was just adjusting a baby earlier today and I was like, just lost in this little baby's eye contact and just connecting, innate to innate, making the physical touch with the intention of just helping amplify the life that was God given to that small child. And I mean, that's really kind of one of my biggest passions here is adjusting kids. I try to make it as fun as possible. I've got a bubble machine. I've got a dinosaur pillow, a unicorn pillow, like whatever it takes for that kid to feel comfortable. There's that quote, it's easier to grow healthy kids than it is to fix sick adults. And that's the truth. I think that's the key to really, really making a difference is teaching them young that your body is strong, your body is powerful, your body can heal itself if you take care of it. And then teaching them how to take care of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Babies also don't study. I don't think that there are little eternal souls studying for, okay, I've got to be sitting by this time. And boy, I got to be crawling and rolling. Oh, nope, I should roll before I crawl. Like they're not studying what they should do. It's all written into their cells, into their innate intelligence, how to do all of these things. And then we grow up and we get bogged down with all the physical stress, the chemical stress, the emotional stress, and we forget that that same intelligence that started out with 2 cells is still within us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I love this conversation. I'm going to kind of wrap it up with just the important thing I feel like in this all is just how much everyone deserves access to their best life and their best quality of life. Like you said, if we can start as children, the best time to start is today. But I love that you shared this story, and how wonderful would it be if every single person, whether they had a specific symptom that needed to be helped or whether they just needed to live their best life so that they could have a good quality of life, could have chiropractic care.
Absolutely. That's the truth of it.
Yeah. Well, thank you for being here today. And I look forward to more stories with you and from you. And thank you for how you serve your community.
Yes, thank you for having me.
What powerful stories. Did that grip your heart like it did mine? I sure hope so. And I'm so grateful to Dr. Julia for sharing with us today. Now, I have an important announcement. This podcast is being hosted by my membership, Adjust Your Marketing Blueprint. This is where I support and help chiropractic teams to do their own in-house digital marketing without wasting a lot of time or trying to figure it out and all of that frustration. It is a video course with a manual. It is a graphic library with all of the templates that you need, as well as a calendar so you can actually implement what you learned in the course. And then it is group coaching where you can reach out to me, have a monthly call, and really get the support that you need and the accountability so that you can do your digital marketing and not waste thousands of dollars and thousands of hours of time. So the link is in the show notes. Reach out if you have any questions about Adjust Your Marketing Blueprint.